The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. Every good treasure hunter knows that when you unroll your trusty treasure map and you follow the conveniently provided dotted line, you know you have found the treasure when your eye lands on the X. X marks the spot, right? While I am an amateur treasure hunter at best, I've kind of taken to this idea that X marks the spot for finding treasure. The way I've come to appreciate this important rule for all treasure seekers is a bit unconventional, however. I have a pretty decent bundle of pictures, each showing where I am, and in the sky above, conveniently painted by jet streams, is a big X. These are moments in my life, places I have been, that I have found unforgettable treasure under that X in the sky. Those unintentional X's have been helpful reminders for me to recognize and give thanks for so many moments that are special and treasured. One instance I remember very clearly came at the end of my time in Spain. I studied abroad in Sevilla for a semester in college, and as I was walking around the city one last time before heading home, reminiscing about all the good times I'd had, feeling thankful for the experience, I looked up, and sure enough, there, clear as day, was a huge white X in the clear blue sky. And I thought to myself, well, isn't that perfect? X marks the spot, and this spot is one I will treasure for all I've learned and enjoyed. A little bit of my heart will always be in Sevilla, because I put a little bit of my treasure there. Financial treasure, of course, but more than that, I placed some of the treasure of my time and my energy. I had to let go of my preference to be comfortable and stick with the familiar, which I think many of us treasure. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. There will be the seat and center of your life. The order here is interesting. I think we tend to assume that we will invest and give away our treasure to whatever we think matters most in life. Whatever we care about most, that's where our treasure will go. Wherever your heart is, there your treasure will be also. But that's not what it says, right? Wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This makes it sound like first you have to decide to put your treasure where you want the center of your life to be, and your heart will follow. Value-based budgeting has been a bit of a trendy topic in the last decade or so. Maybe you've heard the concept that if you look at an organization's budget or an individual budget, it will give you a pretty good indication of what they value. To me, it sounds similar to our gospel reading. Follow the money trail, and you'll find what you value and what you think about most often. But treasure is more than money, right? So I wonder what would happen if we made a budget of our time, or of our energy, or of our mental capacity. What would these budgets show about where we spend our treasure, and therefore where our hearts are also? How much of our budgets are spent because we're afraid? Afraid of getting older, afraid of losing our possessions, afraid that it's never going to be enough? Now listen, wise financial planning is a wonderful thing. Fear-based financial planning is maybe not so much. In 2 of our readings this weekend, we hear God say, "Do not be afraid." When we think about where we put our treasure, how does fear affect us? When we're afraid, we tend to spend our time, our money, our energy on trying to secure ourselves and our stuff, and maybe do not spend much on things outside ourselves. When we're afraid, we tend not to give alms, that is, show compassion and mercy to others. Fear quickly becomes a powerful dictator over our treasure. But what if we trusted God's words? Do not be afraid. And trusted God's promise that God's kingdom is ours, and it is God's pleasure to give it to us. Instead of spending all our time focused on ourselves and our shot at gaining the kingdom, either our personal salvation or some earthly kingdom of power and wealth, trusting that God keeps God's promises, we would be free to turn outward to others, to seek in whatever ways we can to be participants with God in bringing God's kingdom to earth, even as we wait for this to be fully realized in Christ. That's the trick. Security can sometimes lead people to let their guard down, to stop paying attention, to become complicit or careless or lazy. But Jesus cautions against this. A faith that trusts in God's promises means remaining watchful and ready, means doing what the Lord has asked us to do on his behalf in the meantime. Faith is another theme in our readings from Hebrews and Genesis. Hebrews illustrates and encourages faith by looking back. In the verses read today, we hear about Abraham and Sarah. The rest of chapter 11 lifts up Rahab, Enoch, Noah, Isaac, Joseph, and Moses as well, all whose actions and impacts, according to Hebrews, could be traced back to their faithfulness in God, who, though faced with fear-inducing trials and faith-testing promises, trusted in God. Who are the Abrahams and Sarahs and Josephs and Rahabs in our lives who provide us with examples of faithfulness? And what did their budgets look like? Or, if the word budget makes you cringe and have nightmarish flashbacks to spreadsheet formulas, let's go back to our treasure map image. If our lives were a treasure map, where would the X be? In our gospel reading today, Jesus suggests our treasure not be in our possessions. Thieves can steal them, and nature and time destroy them. Instead, he encourages that we place our treasure in almsgiving, in acts of mercy and compassion, in people. Relationships are some of the truest treasures we have. Hence the need to preface with, "Do not be afraid." Relationships are hard. It can be hard to give things away, to reach out to strangers with mercy and compassion. There's fear that one day we'll need what we're giving away, or we'll discover that the person we gave it to wasn't worthy or didn't manage it well. But as far as I can tell, the thing with fear is that everyone, no matter how rich or poor, no matter how educated or uneducated, no matter how generous or stingy, whether they have a big house or no house at all, everyone experiences fear. Storing up treasures for ourselves where a thief can come near and a moth can destroy doesn't bring joy and certainly doesn't alleviate fear. In fact, I would wonder if the more we have to lose, and the more we fear just that. Don't be afraid, Jesus says. And don't be surprised if the ones you turn to give alms to give you back treasure that moths can't destroy and thieves can't steal. The kind of treasure that doesn't elicit fear, an unfailing treasure in heaven. I'm reminded of the 1970 movie Scrooge with Albert Finney. Anyone? Yeah? Yes. Okay, it's a musical take on the classic A Christmas Carol. So we're probably all familiar at least with A Christmas Carol, right? The main character, Ebenezer Scrooge, is a ruthless businessman who is stingy with everything and everyone. He hoards his money, spares no time for anyone, and is emotionally invested in one person, himself. After being shown his past, present, and dismal future, he comes to realize that he's all alone. He has built up walls around himself and his money and has lost far more than he has gained. Seeing the joy of those around him who have far less financial treasure than he, Scrooge decides to share, to begin again and build a future that will last. In the final scene, he is dancing through the streets with children following him along the way. He's buying Christmas gifts and a huge Christmas turkey and forgiving old debts and belting out at the top of his lungs, "I like life, here and now. Life and I made a mutual vow. Till I die, life and I will both try to be better somehow." Scrooge spent his life living in fear that he would lose all that he had gained. He is instead shown that nothing he has gained makes up for all that he has lost. That his is not true treasure. As he starts sharing and giving to others, he starts to build friendships and to find the joy and life that he hadn't realized he was so severely lacking. Now, this might be a bit of an extreme example, but we all have treasures that we store up in one way or another, and sometimes it takes something a bit extreme to turn our fear to faith and our storing up to sharing with. There's a clear progression in our readings today: fear to faith and trust, to action and reaching out, to unfailing treasure in heaven. Jesus said, "Do not be afraid, little flock." By faith and trusting in God's promises, fear can be quieted, and we can invest our treasures in God's kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make for yourselves an unfailing treasure in heaven. Faithful action will begin to bring about God's kingdom right here and now. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.